Good evening, everybody. Welcome into SportsZone. I'm your host, Isaiah Ortiz. The UNT women's basketball team wraps up their season tomorrow night against Rice, and it's been another successful year. Here to talk about it with me today is Mason Branham and Nick Forrester. Guys, how successful has the year been? Mason, I'll start with you.
Well, I mean, this has been probably one of the more successful seasons. I think coming off of last year, with it being a historic year, there was a lot of high expectations, a lot of, kind of momentum going into the season. I think it's been a really good season. I think the way that this team has looked throughout the season has been great. I think the way they've played offensively, defensively, and just as a team has been really great, and I think it's going to carry them forward into the tournament. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more, honestly. I mean, going back from last year, I think a lot of people expected them to sort of like take a step back, maybe not perform as well. But I mean, as shown by their record this year, they're 22-7 right now. That's one game away from last year. If they win again tomorrow night, then they equal. They have more wins in the conference this year than ever before. So definitely, I agree. I think they've gone from step to step, and they've just sort of taken another step forward, and I'm very excited to see.
Yeah, it's been a big year for the Mean Green, which means they've had some big players step up. Now, guys, let's discuss the team MVP. I think there's really one answer here, but Nick, I'll go with you. Who's your MVP?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of beat me to the punch, but I think there's one answer, and there's one answer only, and I think that's Tamisha Lampkin. I mean, she's averaging 17, 10, and a block a game on a staggering 57% from the field goal. I mean, to me, it's clear that she's the real anchor of this team, both on the offensive and defensive side of the court, because that's one aspect I think that we haven't really highlighted too much. Her defensive presence is very like it's very much there. So definitely Tamisha Lampkin is sort of the face of this team, but there are other players, sort of doing their little bits. But yeah, on the whole, Lampkin, she is our main star, I would say.
Yep, Mason?
I think, Tamisha Lampkin, she has been the MVP, but whenever you have a player like Tamisha, you always want to have that 1-2 punch. And I think for her, having Desiree Wooten has been really great this year. I mean, Desiree's been putting up 11 points, 4 boards, 2 assists a game, shooting 40%, 31% from three. She's done really good being that backup guard play that we have seen a lot from this UNT team. Whenever you think of, a lot of more dominant big play, you think, okay, they're going to have a big, they're also going to have a guard. And Desiree's been that guard. She's been able to perform well on the offense. She's been able to play good defense with Lampkin. And I think her and Lampkin have led this team, and she's been one of the leaders of this team. And I think she's done really good so far this season.
Yeah, I agree, honestly. I mean, like Mason said, behind every great big, there is a great guard who feeds the big the ball. And in this case, that's what's happened with Lampkin. I mean, without a guard passing her the ball, giving the ball in the right spots so she can really get to her spots, take the shots that we know she can take, get to the rim. Honestly, I don't think she would have been as successful, as efficient, especially, because that's one thing that I'll talk about a bit later, but one thing that the team has struggled with at times is efficiency, and I think that 1-2 punch has really sort of like improved that.
Yeah, it's always great when you have star power on both sides of the court. But now let's get into the unsung heroes. Obviously, basketball is a team sport, so you need those role players to help support your stars. So, Mason, who are your unsung heroes of the team?
I think my two, looking at this season, has been Hardaway and Jacqueline Moore. I mean, Hardaway's been, again, putting up consistent numbers, 10, 4, and 3, shooting 36% from the field. She's been one of those players that you're able to rely on in those moments. And one thing that a lot of people talk about, the best ability is availability. And she's played in every game so far this season. She had a season-high 21 points earlier this year, and she just has been one of those consistent players that Coach Burton has been able to rely on, and this team has been able to rely on. Now, moving to Moore, she's putting up similar stat lines, and she's also had a lot of consistent production as a starter, and she's been one of the senior leaders along with Tamisha Lampkin. I think with her and Lampkin being those big senior leaders, I think not only is it going to help this team this year, I think it's going to help them in the next couple years, because it's going to help, grow players. It's going to help develop leaders. It's going to help make this team even better. And I think those two players with Hardaway and Moore have just been really the unsung heroes this season.
Yeah, for sure.
I think actually the unsung hero is not actually a player, but actually the Super Pit itself. I mean, if you look at their record, 15-1 at home throughout the whole year, undefeated within their conference at home, I think for me, that is the biggest thing. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the atmosphere. I don't know if it's just, I guess, maybe that the pit itself, the environment that gets these girls going. But for some reason, whenever they play at the pit, they're a force to be reckoned with. So I definitely think the Super Pit is the unsung hero this year.
Yeah, one thing that the Super Pit has really appreciated is the success of Coach Burton in his first 2 years. Guys, it's been insane how well he's done Back-to-back 20-win seasons, obviously won the regular season championship last year. Mason, I'll start with you. There's been so much success during his reign as head coach. What has been the key to that?
Well, I think one of the things that he's been able to do consistently these last 2 years is just be consistent. I mean, there's a lot of times where you'll see coaches, when they have a good season, sometimes they won't have as good of a season the next season. But with Coach Burton, he's been able to have that consistent season day in and day out. And one thing, looking just stats, UNT's beating opponents in basically every major stat: points, rebounds, assists, shooting percentage, defense. They've been the best team. They're beating opponents almost 2-1 in most stats. So Coach Burton has done a really good job of just coaching his team to play well. And if you look at their games, most of the time what you're gonna see is you're gonna look at the third quarter and you're just gonna see an absolute masterclass from Coach Burton. Kind of reminds me of Steve Kerr with the Warriors a few years ago. Whenever you would get into halftime with the Warriors, it'd be a close game, but by the end of the third quarter, you'd be down 10, 15 points because that just was how good of a coach Coach Kerr was in the third quarter. And Coach Burton has had that same impact in the third quarter. There's been a lot of games, especially the home game against Memphis. I believe UNT was down 4 or 6 points, but by the end of the third quarter, they were up 20, 25. So what he's been able to do in the third quarter has been just impressive. And I think what he's going to be able to do at the end of the season is going to be even more impressive. And I think he's definitely going to be one of the key figures so far in this season.
To build on that, I think definitely one aspect that people don't really look at is Coach Burton's impact as a presence in itself. Now, when he first came in 2023, he mentioned last year actually that when he first came in, he didn't even have enough players to run 5-on-5s during practice. I think his presence and him coming from A&M is what has brought more players here, which has increased the competition level at practice. And if the competition level is high at practice, then guess what? It's going to be high in the game. And that's why you're seeing them take these steps forward. That's why you're seeing them do so well within their conference, outside of their conference. And that's why, honestly, I think they have a really good shot to make March Madness. So, and I think that all stems from Coach Burton himself being there as a presence, bringing better players in, bringing his sort of status as a top-level coach to UNT and improving the program as a whole, both internally and externally.
Oh, 1,000%. Now, you mentioned March Madness. Obviously, there's a step we have to take there first, and that's the American Conference Tournament. Right now, UNT sits at the number 2 seed. I believe that would get them a bye. So, previewing this tournament, Nick, who do you think is the biggest threat to UNT?
I think it's pretty obvious. I think the biggest threat is the team in front of them, UTSA. I mean, UTSA did beat them earlier on in the season. That's one of their 3 losses within the conference, alongside Tulsa and South Florida, South Florida the 3rd seed too. And I think that's going to be their biggest threat. I mean, if you look at a player like Jordan Jenkins, she's averaging 18, 7, and is leading the team in blocks. That's a threat always. And you saw it in the game against each other because she went off, and that was honestly the determining factor between the 2 teams. So I think if we do go there and we do make it and we do play UTSA, who I do suspect will be in the final because they have been the best team within the conference all year long, I think stopping her is the main thing that has to be done in order to sort of win and then make it to March Madness.
Yeah, for sure. Mason?
Yeah, I definitely think UTSA is going to be the biggest threat. I think what they've been able to do so far this season has just shown how great of a team they are just as a whole. Again, with Jenkins, she's been voted, she's getting votes for Conference Player of the Year along with Tamisha. And I think that's going to be an interesting battle to watch, I think. But I think this conference tournament is definitely going to play a big part in that. I think whoever comes out on top whenever UNT and UTSA eventually match up, I think is going to get Player of the Year. But another player that I'm looking forward to seeing from UTSA is Nina De Leon. She's one of those shifty guards just like Wooten, and I think that's going to be something to watch for.
Yeah, 1,000%. Real quickly, what will the keys be, Mason, for UNT to win this tournament?
Just third quarters, as it's been all season, consistency, good starts, good defense, good offense, and just play good basketball. That's really all it comes down to, is just play good basketball.
Yeah, Nick?
I mean, for me, it's efficiency. I mean, if you look at the 2 games that they lost to their main rivals, UTSA and South Florida, what happened? They shot 32% from the field. Actually, they shot less. They shot 31% point something, that's not good enough. And honestly, when you play teams of this caliber, you need to be shooting better, and that's what it's going to come down to. If UNT can make their shots, they're going to win the games. If they don't, they're going to lose just like they did in the regular season.
Yep. All right. Coming up next, we're going to continue our March talk with the men's basketball landscape.
I use Flex to buy my favorite snacks.
I use Flex to get me through my mornings. I use Flex at my favorite campus restaurants. I love how Flex is a cashless payment method.
And can be used at all campus dining venues.
So, how do you use Flex?
And you can almost be tricked into thinking that there's a happy ending here. I think that's so powerful. It's a true story of Ruth Snyder. There's some kind of liberties in the story. The young woman is definitely more of a sympathetic character than the original Ruth Snyder.
I would say that it is a story about a woman breaking out of the box she has been put in by society.
It is a story about societal pressures, and it's also a story about love and what drives somebody to sometimes do things that may seem awful.
I really like the soundscapes. I think that they add a nice layer to the show.
Be prepared for an incredibly immersive, anxiety-ridden experience.
How she sees the world and the way that she sees these different faces all the time. This is like how the machine rolls.
Welcome back in the Sports Zone. Now, March Madness is right around the corner, and with the season wrapping up, there's still a ton to discuss. So here to join with me to talk about college basketball today is Jai Mitchell and Griffin Flack. Guys, there are a lot of good teams in college basketball right now. Jai, I'm going to start with you. Who do you think is the best team in the country?
I know Auburn right now is ranked #1, but I feel like it's Duke. I feel like Duke has the best starting lineup right now in college basketball, and they also have the future #1 pick, Cooper Flack.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about Auburn, but it's Duke. Cooper Flack's been saving my parlays all year. I got to go with Duke. Duke's averaging 83 points per game. They're only giving up 61, which is 7th in the nation. They got the #1 overall pick in Cooper Flack. They got a breakout star in Tyrese Proctor, and they have the 6th man of the year in Isaiah Evans, who's been putting up like 15 points a game off the bench, giving them that spark. So I would also go with Duke.
Now, you guys both said not Auburn, the #1 team in the nation by a lot of coaches' polls. Obviously, they're #1 for a reason. They're in a tough conference. So, Griffin, why do you feel like Auburn just isn't the best team right now?
I don't think they have that surefire star like Duke has and Cooper Flack. In March Madness, you need that guy, and I don't think Auburn does. I do have, this is a spoiler, but I do have Coach of the Year, Bruce Pearl of Auburn. I do have him as Coach of the Year, leading Auburn to the #1 seed. But I just think Duke in March Madness is going, this team kind of reminds me of the 2019 with Zion and Cam Reddish and RJ Barrett, even though they lost to Michigan State. I just think Cooper Flack really elevates this team.
Yeah, obviously teams like Duke, Florida, you got to mention Houston, they're all going to get attention for the right reason. But let's kind of focus on the teams that don't get a lot of attention right now. Every March, you kind of see that team that comes out of nowhere, but really they've been good this whole time. So, Griffin, I'll go with you. Who's been your most underrated team in college basketball?
I'm going to go with St. John's. St. John's is #7 in the country right now. No one's really talking about them. In the preseason rankings, they were all the way down at the bottom of the list. And the hiring of Rick Pitino has really elevated this team. They were so low in the preseason rankings, like I said, but they have been phenomenal on defense in their backcourt with Kaderi Richmond and Devion Smith. Plus, they're also undefeated at home. So I would have to go with St. John's as the most underrated team. They're sitting at #7 right now, and no one's really talking about them.
Yeah, you can never count out Rick Pitino, especially during March. Jai, who's your most underrated team?
I would say St. John's as well. Like going into this season, nobody expected St. John's to be ranked top 10. I feel like that's pretty impressive. They also just won conference, and they don't have no future first-round draft picks. I feel like that's very impressive.
Yeah, they've done a good job. Obviously, UNT's former player Aaron Scott is on that roster. Happy to see him hooping. But I feel like a team we didn't mention that's on my list is Clemson. I think obviously they were a Final Four team last year. They're in a really underrated conference this year. They beat Duke earlier. I think they're a team we need to watch out for. Now let's go to the other side of the spectrum. There are a lot of teams some may consider overrated. So Jai, who's your most overrated team?
I would say UCF. I feel like that team going into this season, everybody was talking about maybe that they was going to win the Big 12 championship. They got Mikey Williams, they got Dior Johnson, but they just haven't been performing well this season.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to mention Mikey Williams, but I like Mikey Williams. He was very hype, but I mean, the hype has died down. So UCF is overrated in my opinion, but my most overrated is Tennessee. Even though they're ranked top 5, I do not think Tennessee can beat the teams ahead of them. I could see an upset in the March Madness bracket. Like I could see them get eliminated really early. Like I said, they don't have that bona fide star, that lottery pick. I don't know if they even have like a first round pick. They play well as a team, but in March Madness you kind of need that X factor, that superstar. And they have struggled to beat top teams like Kentucky and Auburn in the year. And in March Madness, you've got to be able to beat those good teams. So I would say Tennessee is really overrated in my opinion.
Now, Jai, what do you think about that pick? Because Tennessee, that's a top 5 team. They've been a top 5 team all year. They have a good coach in Rick Barnes. How do you feel about Griffin calling them the most overrated team in college basketball?
I wouldn't necessarily say that they're overrated, but I feel like they haven't been playing to the expectations that a lot of people expected them to play. So I feel like, in college basketball, you had to reach your expectations, and they just haven't been doing that so far.
Yeah, they've been really inconsistent on offense, and I just can't really trust them in a single elimination game in March against like a team like Auburn or Duke or even St. John's. I mean, you can't really beat Rick Pitino. I don't see them beating Rick Pitino in March Madness. So, yeah, Tennessee's pretty overrated.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's a tough conference. I was going to pick A&M here, but they did drop in the polls recently to 22, so they're no longer overrated in my book. Now, there are obviously the bubble teams. The bubble is something that's going to be discussed heavily throughout these next 2 weeks as we get into conference tournament time. So, Jai, I'll start with you. What bubble team can make some noise and make March Madness?
I would say TCU. Like, that's one team that I feel like nobody needs to sleep on TCU. They have a nice closer, Noah Reynolds. I feel like they could upset anybody come tournament time.
Yeah, and I'm going to go with North Carolina. I think UNC can make some noise. They're always in the dance, and they've had a down year, but I do think that UNC, if they get into the tournament, could make some noise because they have a history of making the Final Four, the Elite Eight. They have a history of making it really far in the tournament. So I do think they're on the first 4 out. So if they make it into the tournament, I could see them making it pretty far.
Yeah, obviously North Carolina has been one of the premier college basketball programs, but they are in a down year. Griffin, do you think they can make a run for the ACC tournament?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, if you look, no one in that conference can really scare me away from picking North Carolina. I do think North Carolina, with the experience and just the tradition that they have, can for sure win the AAC tournament. So.
All right, let's transition into some award talk. Obviously, there are 2 major awards to talk about. We're going to start with the Naismith Player of the Year. It's a big spectrum. Obviously, you have some fifth-year seniors in there. You have some freshmen, #1 overall picks potentially in that conversation. Jai, who is your Player of the Year?
I would say Cooper Flag. Cooper Flag has just been dominating all season long. Even he had reclassed. He's really supposed to be a senior right now. So for him being able to do what he's been doing all season long and lead them to the second best team in the country, I feel like that's pretty impressive.
I don't think you can say anyone other than Cooper Flag right now. He's averaging 20 points, 8 rebounds, 2.5 assists, shooting 52% from the field, 41% from 3. And he was dominating the USA men's basketball team in practice. He was shooting over guys like AD. Like you said, he's supposed to be a senior. Cooper Flag is the consensus #1 overall pick. So, I mean, it's hard to say anyone other than Cooper Flag right now.
Yeah, Cooper Flag is definitely going to be a popular pick. Let's go into Coach of the Year. Griffin, I know you kind of said yours earlier, but go into more in-depth of why you have Bruce Pearl as your Coach of the Year.
Yeah, I got Bruce Pearl because what he has done to this Auburn team is pretty remarkable. He just led them. He's had 6 weeks at the top of the AP poll. He's at #1, and he led Auburn to #1 for the first time in the history of this school. And his dynamic coaching style is pretty impressive. He runs he's fast-paced on offense, but he's aggressive on defense, which, I mean, he's the whole game, he's being so aggressive and he's applying pressure and really spreading the floor out. It's just remarkable to see what Bruce Pearl has done to this Auburn team.
And Jai, who is your Coach of the Year?
I would say Coach Rick from St. John's. I just feel like what he's been able to do this season and lead them to a top 10 seed, I feel like that's pretty impressive with nobody expecting them to be this good going into this season.
Yeah, let's get into more of Rick Pitino. Obviously, he's been great everywhere he's gone, but St. John's just feels like a different story. Obviously, Big East, it was run by Dan Hurley. Jai, how good of a job has he done?
I feel like he's done a tremendous job because nobody expected them to just be this good. I feel like come tournament time, they might upset some people because you never want to underestimate nobody, and it's always that one team that makes March Madness interesting, and I feel like that's going to be St. John's.
Yeah, Rick Pitino, I mean, what he has done to this St. John's team is really impressive. The preseason rankings, they were so low. Now they're 7th, sitting atop the AP poll. They could definitely make some noise, and they could upset Tennessee, like I mentioned before. They could make it really far into the tournament.
Oh, yeah, March, best time of the year. But coming up next, we're going to talk about the Dallas Stars making their return.
Craving something fresh, flavorful, and made just for you? Look no further than Avesta, your go-to destination for a delicious, full-service dining experience. Dive into our customizable omelets, expertly crafted by our talented cook Jonathan, who guarantees every bite is perfection. All our dishes are handmade, prepared with only the freshest ingredients. Explore our assembly line where you can choose from any of our globally inspired dishes, or customize your plate. It's that easy. And let's not forget dessert. Indulge your sweet tooth with treats from Clark Bakery. With convenient payment methods including card or flex, it's the perfect dining spot for any occasion. Quench your thirst with our wide selection of drinks. Just hand your drinking card to our friendly waiter, and they'll bring your beverage of choice right to your table. When you're done savoring every last bite, our attentive staff will whisk away your tray. Enjoy the peaceful ambiance as you dine in, or use our takeout option for a meal on the go. Avesta.
Welcome back in the Sports Zone. The Dallas Stars are back from their Four Nations break, and they look to continue to get their push for the Stanley Cup championship throne. Here to talk about it with me today is Valentina Rojas and Kristen Brasuch. Now, guys, they're about 5 games back in action. Valentina, how have they looked so far?
I mean, you just said we were 5 games back in, but we're 4-1 record after the Four Nations face-off. And despite some sloppy moments, I think we've been struggling with the defense, but our offense have been, putting up the front and really helping the Stars. They had limited practice time. It was a very back-to-back scheduled, so they found ways to win. And obviously, they're showcasing that they have the ability and the strength to face those on-the-road games with this much trauma,
Yeah, Christian?
Yeah, I think going off of what she said, the defense before the break, they were allowing 2.44 points per game. That's up to 3.1, which obviously is still great, but you'd like to see that go back down. Jason Robertson has been great as always. Matt Duchesne, he has scored or assisted in every win since coming back from the break. The only game that we lost is the game that he didn't score. I think that's telling that he needs to keep going with this hot streak if this team wants to win. But I think that this team is looking good coming back from the break. They're in a good spot to contend for the playoffs.
Yeah, they've been great. Obviously, like I mentioned, they're in contention to really get the Stanley Cup this year. We haven't seen that in a very long time. So, Christian, you kind of mentioned some players who have stood out already. Are there any other players who have really stepped up post-All-Star break?
I think Thomas Harley is a good example of that. Thomas Harley has gone really a lot better in the attack. He's been passing the puck, I'm sorry. He's racked up a goal and 6 assists since they've returned from the break. And that's been big, allowing the attack to get out and to get out in transition. The only problem really is the defense, and I think that's going to get back up as they go. So,
yeah, obviously you see up there the long haul. It's been a long road trip for the Stars too. They opened up their break with a 3-game road trip, finishing 2-1. Valentina, how do you think they did during that road trip?
I mean, on that road trip, I think, like I said, despite the scrambly things that we've been through, Christian mentioned a lot of things, and like obviously the Wyatt Johnson, he's been an amazing player. He scored a hat trick the other day, and all of those hat tricks were scored during a power plays. And the Dallas Stars have been known to sometimes struggle on those power plays, so they've been really stepping that up. Rupe Hintz, he was named the second, star of the NHL this week, so it's been really good. And I think they're building the road resilience with a 13-7-3 road record this season, which prove that they can perform under the tough conditions, and they're maintaining that momentum, and they're doing better even that they were last season in maintaining that and the impact. I think they're going to be at the top of the difference, and we're definitely going to probably see them as a strong contender for the Stanley Cup if they continue this momentum.
Yeah, you mentioned that road record, 13-7-3. The positive side, 6 games over, is where you want to be in that standpoint. So, Christian, as a contending team, how important are these road trips, and especially finishing 2-1?
Yeah, I think that these road trips are the ones that you look at when it comes playoff time that you wish you did better on in most cases. Most teams are wishing that they had come away with 1 or 2 wins, and I think that this year the Stars have been great on the road. I don't think that that's going to be a problem. I think that whenever we look at the standings at the end of the season, the games that the Stars have on the teams below them are going to come down to the road, and that the Stars were able to get it done. You look at the win against the Devils, the Stars have lost their last 2 matchups whenever they're on the road against the Devils. And winning that one is a good sign for this team as they head into the second half of the season. I mean, yeah, I think that they really are looking good as the season goes on, into the second half.
Yeah, the second half of the season, obviously that means playoffs are almost here, but that also means the trade deadline is nearing as well. Obviously, the Stars are in contention. They're a playoff team, and playoff teams look to upgrade their rosters any way they can. So, Christian, I'll start with you first. How aggressive should the Stars be at the deadline?
I think that there was some traction to Seth Jones, the defender from, I think he was in Chicago, to coming to the Dallas Stars, but he ended up getting traded to Florida to help an already great defense. I think that was where we missed out, was the defensive market. It's looking kind of dry now, but this offense and defense are still both top 5 at the moment. I don't think that they have to be too aggressive. I think that if you can give up some draft capital to get some depth, then you do it. But I think that with this young core that the Stars have, they don't want to go too overboard and risk that the future that this team has.
Valentina?
I disagree with Christian. I think they need to be very aggressive in the market. We really need a defense right now. And like he said, the market is very dry right now, but that doesn't mean that there are not strong contenders that the Stars could pick up. There's obviously Brian Dumoulin, Tyson Barrie, there's Scott Mayfield. These are contenders for a defense that we really need right now. And although our offense has been stepping on a lot, we need to have that defense to secure for the Stanley Cup. I believe that obviously with the injuries that the Stars have been going through, one of the best alternatives we're going to need during the trade is probably going to have an LTIR loophole with Miro's cap because it's going to be really important for the team to really make it into the playoffs.
Yeah, Valentina mentioned some names already. Christian, are there any players, even though you're against the trade, are there any players you would kind of look towards for the Stars to make a move if they are aggressive?
Yeah, we're talking about upgrading on the defense. I think that Philadelphia Flyers, Rasmus Ristolainen, he just recently requested a trade. I think that that's a big name the Stars could go for if they wanted to make a splash, but I just think that they'd have to give away a young asset, and I don't know if it's worth it for this team to give away their future for a win here in the last few years, or in the next few years, I mean.
Yep.
I completely agree with that, thinking about like the young talent we have. We were just talking outside how a lot of our players are veterans, and we just keep them in the Stars because it's the Stars. You know, we have Jamie Benn, we have all of those older players that we really don't want to get rid of. But if we're talking about trading some of our younger talent, we know that Matt Dumba and Craig Smith what could be a good option, but we're not going to get a lot of return on that. And that's not going to be good of just making trades and having to start anew if you're not going to get a good return on that. We also have Burke, who is a solid trade, but are we going to get really what we need if we trade him? So they're struggling with, are people going to want young talent going into the Stanley Cup, or are we going to take the risk and try to, improve our team? So I think, like we mentioned, like it's going to be a hard decision for the Stars on deciding if their defense and what they have right now, it could improve, because we also have injuries, and that is something that we really need to take into account.
Yeah, I think for any contending team with just kind of sitting in the middle here, a lot of older stars and younger players, you're kind of just in the middle. You can't decide what path to take. Reminds me a lot of the Celtics in the NBA. Right. They kind of had those veterans. Christian, I'm going to go with you here. Do you think they should even consider making a move, or should they stay put?
I think that the Stars should maybe feel it out. I think that this is a deadline team, that the day of the deadline, you have players that you can afford to give away. You have Stankoven, you have Dadonov. Those are players that, although they're great and they're contributing players, they're on the wrong side of 30. Both, I want to say 34 and 35. Those are players that you can afford to give away because you know you have younger guys that will at least develop into something better than they are right now, as opposed to two players that are clearly declining in their career right now.
Yeah, Valentina, are there any Stars players you think should be off the team? Just you don't want to see anymore?
No. I really do like all of the Stars players, but I think especially with the loss of Tanev and like Sutter and Miro's injury, it's going to be really hard to see any more players disappear from the Stars.
Yeah, Christian?
Yeah, I think same here. I just can't really see any of the longtime players that the Stars have being let off right now. But back to Stankoven, I just think that if the Stars want to upgrade this roster at all, they have to look at those older players. They cannot trade away their youth like their neighbors in Dallas just did with Luka Doncic. They have to keep those young prospects in Dallas this time.
Yeah, I think the Stars are really just in a great place. So coming up next, we're going to talk about the NFL offseason.
There's no harm in wanting to have fun while in college, but it's easy to lose track of how much you've had. Apps like Drink Control and Alkadroid can help keep track of your consumption and blood alcohol levels. If you or someone else does drink too much, the signs of alcohol poisoning are as follows: pale skin, vomiting, confusion, low body temperatures, irregular breathing, blacking out, and is hard to wake up or cannot be woken up.
Dude, are you okay? Hey, what's wrong? Wake up.
It's an exciting time of year, but it's important to be responsible. If you suspect someone is suffering from alcohol poisoning, get help immediately. You will not get in trouble for seeking help if you are underage. For more info and resources, go to UNT's Division of Student Affairs.
Hey Alex, this guy on the internet says he wants to give me money.
That sounds suspicious.
What do you mean?
Typically, strangers who promise you money on the internet have their own best interest in mind. They often use bounced checks, which will disappear shortly after depositing, but not before they've asked for some money in return.
So he doesn't really want to spoil me?
No.
Well, then what should I do?
The best way to handle it is to block and report the suspicious message, or even consult local law enforcement if you've already fallen victim.
So I guess we aren't going to Key West for spring break.
No.
Welcome back to SportsZone. While the NFL season may be over, the league really never sleeps. So today we're going to do our best to predict where the biggest names available are going to land. Here to join with me to talk about it today, Gunnar Talbot, Julian Lofgren. Now, there was already a big name who already made his decision, I guess, and that's T. Higgins. T. Higgins was franchise tagged by the Bengals earlier today. So Gunnar, I'll start with you. What do you think about this move?
This is a dumb move by the Bengals. Part of the deal. I don't know why they're spending money re-signing T. Higgins. I get that, Joe Burrow's advocating it, Jamar Chase. Of course they want it. They're his friends. But offense clearly wasn't the problem last year, right? If Joe Burrow truly is a top 5, top 4 quarterback, which everyone sees as he is, Mahomes doesn't really have the number one option. They moved off Tyreek Hill, still wins. Josh Allen, they moved off Stephon Diggs, still wins. Lamar Jackson's never had a great number one. Joe Burrow needs to prove to us that he's not. If he's with those guys, he doesn't need 2 number one options. They should use his money on defense, which was 27th ranked last year. That's why they didn't make the playoffs. They don't need more offense.
Yeah, a lot of conversation going with Cincinnati this year. They chose to keep T. Higgins. Julian, how do you feel?
I feel they kind of missed an opportunity. I feel T. Higgins is a pretty sought-after prospect, and they could have probably got a pretty good defensive value player from him, but they just chose not to. So looking back, I think they really missed an opportunity for them to get a highly sought after defensive prospect and maybe trade for a younger guy who can develop into a first team all pro type of guy. And they just kind of missed the opportunity by franchise tagging T. Higgins. And like Gunnar said, offense last year wasn't the problem. They're scoring 40 points a game, but their defense is giving up 50, and that's why they're losing games.
Yeah, I mean, obviously when you have a talent like T. Higgins, you want to keep him around, but you guys mentioned defense, and one of the biggest defensive players right now who could be available is Myles Garrett. So obviously it's going to take a lot to get Myles Garrett. Julian, what team do you think pushes that red button and trades for him?
I looked today, and sadly, right now the team is the front runner to land him is the Eagles, and I'm hoping that it's not the Eagles who end up getting Myles Garrett. I know a lot of people say they're going to move on from Zach Bond, clear up some cap, but I still don't think they're going to have enough cap to get Myles Garrett. So I hope it's not the Eagles who end up with Myles Garrett, and then other people are saying the Lions, another team kind of maybe close to the front to land Myles Garrett. But I don't know. I still think it's up in the air for where Myles Garrett lands.
See, the thing with the Eagles is I just don't see them, like, the package they would have to put together. They just won the Super Bowl. Like, and they're keeping most of their talented players, and their whole D-line all has chemistry. Most of them went to Georgia. They're all young. They're all on rookie contracts. Why break up a defensive line who just took apart a 3-year dynasty to sign Myles Garrett, who's just going to ruin that chemistry? I think a funny thing is that the Browns are like, oh, we don't intend to trade him. They're going to trade him. I think they're just saying that to try to get the asking price up. But if I was the Browns, the two teams I would really look at would be the Lions, like Julian said. That would be crazy. Aiden Hutchinson, Myles Garrett. But another interesting one would be the Bills, all right? The Bills do want Myles Garrett. I think that they have the cap space to sign him. They have the pieces to put together a package. They have a lot of young players and picks that they can package. And they need that defensive star. We saw a few years ago that they picked up Von Miller, who was an aging pass rusher, to try to win a Super Bowl. 3 years later, why not do the same thing? They just made the AFC Championship.
I mean, I'm going to agree with Julian here. I think the Eagles could make the biggest push. Josh Sweat's a free agent. Milton Williams a free agent. That's two of their best defensive linemen. And you know about Howie Roseman now. Went for Saquon this past offseason. It paid off. I think they'd make Myles Garrett work. One thing about Myles Garrett is he loves sacking the quarterback, and that's the next position we're going to talk about. Sam Darnold is probably going to be the biggest name available at quarterback. So, Gunnar, I'm going to go with you here. Where do you think Sam Darnold lands?
I don't really think many teams even want Sam Darnold, all right? After he was the sole reason that they arguably lost those last 2 games of the season. They went from possibly getting the 1 seed and a bye to having a horrible showing against the Lions, and even a worse showing in the playoffs. It's basically being the sole reason they lost those games, which is sad, but it's like, hey, Sam Darnold, you're just not that good at football. You don't really deserve this $40, $50 million deal that people were talking about. That I think the most likely, either the Vikings could franchise tag him and maybe just have him sit behind or mentor J.J. McCarthy. But if you want to be interesting, maybe the Niners. Because hear me out. Do they really want to pay Brock Purdy $50 million? They already had Sam Darnold there 2 years ago. And if the Niners could be looking at the Vikings offense, which is a very similar offense, seeing that they have arguably more weapons and try to, imitate that success, but with a better defense.
Julian?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the teams that I see that might be one of the only landing places for Sam Darnold is the Las Vegas Raiders. A team that doesn't really have that clear quarterback. And if they pick up Sam Darnold, maybe this allows them then in the draft to get maybe an Abdul Carter type of guy. Then they don't have to spend the pick on a quarterback. Maybe they kind of go a budget route and get Sam Darnold for a year or two, and that allows them to pick up a highly sought-after defensive player, maybe a James Pierce Jr., Abdul Carter type of guy in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you guys named some big landing spots. I'm going to have a very underrated landing spot for you guys right here. The Colts. Give me the Colts to sign Sam Darnold. Obviously, Anthony Richardson, they've had some question marks with him. They need some stability. Why not get, really now, a proven veteran, a Pro Bowl quarterback now, sign him to a short-term deal. There's a good offensive line. Jonathan Taylor's there as well. I think that'd be great support for Sam Darnold. Let's now transition into a veteran wide receiver, former All-Pro, former Pro Bowler, obviously former Super Bowl MVP, and Cooper Kupp. He's now available for trade. Julian, where do you think he'll land?
So one team that I kind of shocked me when I was really thinking about it, and it's the Los Angeles Chargers. They don't really have a clear number one guy. The Quentin Johnson plan, drafted him in the first. That clearly didn't work out. So they're kind of in need of a clear number one guy, and I think Cooper Kupp could be that guy for them.
just like the Chargers would be cool. I had the Chargers for T. Higgins before he signed that franchise tag. My one problem with them is they already have, Lad McConkey, who kind of would fill the same role. I think some good fits would be, if he wants to win now, Ravens could arguably use him. Ravens have proven that they want to sign like older receivers kind of past their primes. He would be a good third option behind Zay Flowers and Bateman. And then maybe a rogue shout here, but the Jaguars. Hear me out. The Jaguars have a lot of cap room. No one likes to talk about them because who cares about the Jaguars, right? But him being that third option, being that slot receiver, Trevor Lawrence is kind of a prove-it year. He finally got to win something. I think he would fit in really good with that offense.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned the Ravens. That's where I actually have Cooper Kupp going. Cooper Kupp's a great blocking wide receiver, will do the dirty work on third downs. The Ravens traded for Deontay Johnson earlier in the year, so obviously they were looking for that third wide receiver. I think Cooper Kupp, at this point, if the Rams were, open to eat up some cap space, I think Cooper Kupp would be a great landing spot there. Now, we did have a trade this past weekend, and it may have shocked some people. Deebo Samuel is a Washington Commander now. He got flipped for a 5th-round pick. Gunnar, what are your thoughts on this trade?
I think it's an okay trade from the Commander's standpoint. I like what they're thinking, but maybe they might be rushing it a little bit too much. Because they finally had a good season. They finally made it to the NFC Championship. They have a young quarterback they don't have to pay. They have as much cap room as you can think of. And, they got Marshawn Lattimore. They get Deebo. But I don't know if Deebo's still the difference maker that he was 3 years ago. Like, he hasn't had a 1,000-yard receiving season in about 5 years. And I think sometimes teams with, this much success and this much cap room sometimes rush stuff, and then they find themselves in contracts that are bad 2 years down the line. Because think about it, next year, they're not the new kids on the block. People know the Commanders are good. They're going to be thinking about the Commanders. Jane might have a sophomore slump. There's film on them. So I don't love the move because I don't think Deebo Samuel's a player he was.
Yeah. Julian?
For me, I kind of think, this is a pretty good move for the Commanders. We've seen them do this before, taking guys who a little bit outside their prime. Austin Eckler, he's now a Commander. Bobby Wagner, he's now a Commander. They take these guys who are kind of past their prime and try to, relive their careers in Washington. So I think it's a good idea on the Commanders' part because, like I said, they really only gave up a 5th. And compared to what the Cowboys did, gave up a 4th round to get Jonathan Mingo, a guy who really didn't do anything for us. So I think it's a good move and a good idea for the Commanders. And I don't really think they're going to really suffer because they only gave up a 5th to get him.
I don't know. This Commanders team's kind of reminded me of the 2014 Brooklyn Nets, just getting a whole bunch of old players and trying to make something happen.
Yeah, obviously they made a big move. Now let's talk about the biggest revenge games of all time.
Ever happened to you?
My bike is gone.
Stolen bikes are an epidemic sweeping college campuses across America.
What am I supposed to do?
It's quite simple. The We Mean Green Fund has partnered with the UNT Police Department to offer free bike locks to any UNT student with a bike. Just show up with your bike in tow and ask.
Now I'll never lose my bike ever again.
Enough worrying. Get your bike lock today. Are you looking for a fun club with travel opportunities? Dive into the UNT Swim Club. Practicing Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays from 7 to 9 p.m. at the Pole Recreation Center. We accept members at any skill level. For more information, reach out to us at unt.swimclub on Instagram.
I wonder what's on the radio today. I don't know about this. This is not it.
Everything alternative, commercial free. 88.1 Indy.
Here at KNTU, we have 2 traditional stations, 88.1 Indy and KNTU Jazz. We've also recently launched an internet radio station called Mean Green Hits. If you want to hear more, you can check us out at MediaNorthTexas.com.
That was pretty good.
Welcome back in the Sports Zone. Now, this past week, Luka Doncic made his, not return to Dallas, but He played against his former team. It was his own revenge game. So we decided here to come up with our best revenge moments in sports. Here to talk about it with me today is Christina Orozco and Cuevas Cherry. Christina, let's start with you. What are your top 3 sports revenge moments of all time?
I got number 1, Red Sox and Yankees, 2003 and 2004 ALCS. 2003, we got a lot of brawls. We got Pedro Martinez throwing it at Yankees offense. You know, Yankees coach Don Zimmer at 72 years old coming to fight Pedro, coming to fight all the Red Sox he can get his hands on. You know, Game 7, Yankees are in the 11th inning. They get a walk-off home run from Aaron Boone, sending them to the World Series. Obviously, Red Sox are pissed about this. They come back 2004, ready for revenge. Although they get off to a rough start, they get the Yankees get a 3-game lead. The Red Sox are the first team in the MLB to win from a 3-0 series deficit. They had a bunch of walk-off homers from Big Papi, ace Kurt Schilling coming in Game 6, really fulfilling his role. And then they ended up winning the World Series after beating the Yankees in the ALCS, you know, kind of having that fuel from their huge rivalry for decades long, kind of finishing that out in 2004.
Yeah, I want to get to your second one right here, Niki Lauda. That's not a name I'm personally familiar with. Can you kind of go in depth of why that's such a great moment?
Niki Lauda is notorious for, you know, being one of the most courageous and brave drivers in F1 history. In 1976, at the German Grand Prix, after a suspension failure in his car, in lap 3, I believe, he crashed. The wreck bursted into flames. He was stuck in his car for nearly a minute. He went to the hospital. Doctors said he wouldn't survive. A priest gave him his last rites, thinking that he wasn't going to live. He ended up reviving from that. He came back just 42 days later to the Italian Grand Prix, came back in 4th place, showing people he was there whether or not he was healthy or not. He went against doctor's orders, came back. Unfortunately, his rivalry with James Hunt, he didn't win that championship, but he came back the next year in 1977 and won the WDC, just coming back from that.
Great stuff. Q, what is your list?
My list, from the bottom, we have Deion Sanders returning back to his old stomping ground in Atlanta. This game was highly anticipated, with chatter going back and forth, and the media crowning Atlanta as Deion's home, and he's coming back to it. You had Andre Rion saying Deion's selfish, he just wants the money, he betrayed the team, he was his closest friend, and he betrayed him. And that game was something special. First quarter, Deion and Andre Rion get into a scuffle, absolutely had to do it. They ran the ones. This is when you could fight someone in the middle of an NFL game without getting suspended. Then second quarter, near their own, near Atlanta's 6-yard line, Atlanta throws a pick right to Deion Sanders. He returns it 93 yards, going down the sideline, faces the Atlanta sideline, just shaking his head. Should have paid me. You should have paid me. You in the back should have paid me. And just high steps into the end zone.
Yeah, one thing you don't want to do is mess with prime time. Let's talk about the second spot on your list. That's James Harden dropping 46 points against OKC. I feel like not a lot of people talk about that because he was traded from OKC, but not much about the performance, Q.
This masterclass James Harden, this is when James Harden was really, he already elevated his scoring, but this is when he started to explode, to boom. The game 1 against the Thunder, poops the bed, 17 points, inefficient. They lose against the Thunder. Game 2, he had 25 points, but they got blown out against the Thunder. This game, he had 46 points, 77% from the field, 88% from 3, 91% from the three-point line. And the fourth quarter, when they were already down 14 to the Thunder, he led the Rockets to a 16-point comeback, pretty much by himself, and something special.
Yeah, what about your number 1 revenge moment of all time? I think a lot of people will recognize this one.
LeBron! You had LeBron's 3-1 comeback against the Golden State Warriors, all thanks to not only the Dubs media, to Klay Thompson himself. You have in Game 4, Draymond Green calling LeBron a word I can't say on TV, and LeBron taking it just a little too personal. Klay Thompson said, I guess he got his feelings hurt. Bron heard it, said, All right, bet then. And went from 24 points a game and just elevated to 31 points. I'm pretty sure he had like an 11-point increase, shot 50% from the field, had 8 rebounds, 9 assists. Kyrie also elevated his scoring to like 27 on 50% shooting, both in game 6 or 5 combined for 82 points, 41 each. And then the game 7, you have the infamous block by James on Iguodala. Oh, I could go on for hours about this game, but that is my favorite revenge game. Not because it's Bron. Yeah, it's because it's Bron.
Yeah, one thing LeBron really did in that series was fight back. Christina, there is a revenge moment I forgot to mention on your list, and that's your third one with one of the all-time great fighters in Manny Pacquiao.
Yes. I got Manny Pacquiao's battle, 8-year battle with Juan Manuel Marquez. It spanned over 8 years, 2004 to 2012. A fight won, you know, an established Marquez who had been in the game. He was a championship winner, was fighting newcomer Manny Pacquiao. Manny Pacquiao knocked down Marquez 3 times in round 1. People thought that might have been the real key to him winning. Ended up in a draw, or a split decision, a draw, I think. So that kind of left them kind of wanting more. Obviously, there was no determined real winner. Fight 2, Manny Pacquiao wins, split decision. Everyone was kind of on the fence with this, especially Marquez's team, obviously. It was 2-1 with the judges. Manny Pacquiao knocked out Marquez in round 3, kind of establishing that he was going to probably win that fight. Fight 3, it was a majority decision. Pacquiao moved up in weight just to challenge him, just kind of feeding into that a little bit more, just wanting that win again. And then fight 4, I think everyone knows it. I was like 9 years old. It was stuck in my memory. Round 6. Marquez gives him a perfect right hand, perfectly timed counter right hand to Pacquiao's chin. He goes down immediately. Game over. He won the victory with the KO. Kind of just sealed the deal for him and their rivalry, really.
Yeah, that's really an all-time moment for boxing. Let's go over my list. I think I have some great picks here. Number 3, I have Randy Moss against the Cowboys on Thanksgiving in 1988. Obviously, if you know the lore, the Cowboys, they told Randy Moss they were going to draft him, and obviously they didn't. He ended up on the Vikings, and it just so happened the Vikings played the Cowboys on Thanksgiving that year, and what did he do? He had 3 catches for 163 yards and 3 touchdowns. My number 2, Adolis Garcia versus Houston. Obviously, the Rangers, they were down in Game 5. He gets hit with a pitch, and they lose that game. A brawl breaks out. It looks like it's over. Until it wasn't. Until it wasn't over, the Rangers win that series off of just 2 big performances from Garcia, and they end up winning the World Series. As we know, it will be a part of Dallas sports legend for a long time. And number one, just like Q, LeBron! I have Game 6 LeBron versus Boston. This one is etched in my memory from my childhood. All the critics were talking about him. How are you down to the Unks? How are you down to Paul Pierce, to Kevin Garnett? If you lose, you're cooked. Your legacy is over. We will never respect you. And then he goes and drops 46 points, obviously wins the ring that year. Q, what did you think about my top 3?
Top 3, for your number 1, that was Randy Moss. It actually reminded me of this year's wide receiver for the Chiefs, Xavier Worthy, against the Bills in the AFC Championship. Actually torched them a little bit too, so it reminded me of that. But those 3 catches, just 60-plus yard bombs? Come on now. Second, I'm not too versed in fighting, but third one, LeBron. LeBron's had, I feel like every time LeBron goes against the Celtics, it's a revenge game. Every time. He pretty much owns the Celtics, no matter what year, unless you go like maybe 2005. But anything after that, it's really LeBron's world.
Yeah. Christina, what'd you think?
I mean, Adolis Garcia, that's just ingrained in everyone in the DFW area that roots for the Rangers, at least. I remember being up from my couch. I was cheering. I'm not even like a big Rangers fan, but that is just so memorable, so good to just defeat the Astros in the way that they did and really show it to them. After, the fights that they had and all the arguing and all the beef that they had, it was just a really good win for DFW.
Yeah, that was a moment everyone loved watching, and I hope you loved watching our show today. Thank you so much for joining. Make sure to tune in Thursday for their episode of Sports Zone.